Okay, I'm going to start this morning by welcoming everyone. Sawadee Kap. Welcome to Wat Tung Yu. Welcome back to all of you guys that are joining us again. Welcome to any new students and welcome to those of you guys online. This is the 5th day of a course that we've been teaching titled Harmony in Relationships. And we're going to start our class off the way we have been with loving kindness meditation. I'm going to do a little bit of breathing mindfulness, then go into loving kindness, come back to breathing mindfulness, and then come out with our chanting. And then afterwards, we have 2 topics this morning. One is the path to enlightenment, practicing the path in the workplace, because in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be able to practice the teachings at all times, not just at home in your personal relationships, but if you're working, you're going to need to be able to practice the teachings there too, but you might be challenged with how to do that. So I'm going to help you to understand how to do that. Then after that, we'll take a break and give you guys a chance to relax and things like that perhaps. And then we'll move into our next topic, which is called the art of the friendly no. How to say no without saying no. This is going to help you to preserve your relationships because you're going to be interacting with a lot of people who are in the unenlightened state and they really don't like to hear the word no. So you're going to need to say no in certain situations, but you'd like to be able to say no without saying no, right? Because that potentially will create painful feelings in their mind based on their cravings, and then they'll push you aside and you'll end up losing relationships. So I'm going to teach you these 2 topics this morning after our meditation. So if you'd like to join for meditation, we have these chants that are going to help just ease our mind into meditation so we get more benefit out of the meditation. And then afterwards, I'll guide you in meditation. So you're welcome to join along with the chanting if you like. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakewa Bhutang Mahakewanhang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakewata Dhammo Dhammang Namasami Supatipano Mahakewato Sāvaka Saṅkho Saṅghang Namami Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa Iti piso Mahakewa Arahang Samma Sambuddho Vicacaranang Sambuddho Sakato Rokavitu Anutero Purisa Dhamma Sati Satatawa Manusanang Bhutto Bhagavati. Okay, with the lower body comfortable and the hands and arms relaxed and the upper body erect, just close the eyes And start breathing in through the nose and out through the nose. Here you're just looking to establish the breath. A nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose, establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. And then whenever you're ready, exhale out through the nose. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Your breath may not match up with the guidance that I'm providing, and that's okay. This is your practice. I'm just here for guidance. You can use this voice as a reminder that whenever you get to the next inhale, breathing gradually through the nose, establishing a nice, natural, steady, consistent breath. Not forced or controlled, just a gradual inhale through the nose. And when you're ready, exhale out through the nose, experiencing the full breath. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. Once the breath is well established, start fixating the mind on the breath. Either the sound of the breath coming into the nose or the sensation of air moving over the skin into the nose. The breath is the present moment. Fixate the mind on the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. With the mind fixated on the breath, whenever you notice that it moves off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. No need to observe the thought, label it, judge it, analyze it, or even try to figure out where it's coming from. Whenever you notice that the mind is moved off the breath, cut that off, let it go, and come back to the breath, the present moment. Breathing in and out. Breathing in and out. I'm going to be quiet now and let you do this work of focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Then I'll be back with more guidance on loving kindness meditation. You have nowhere to go. You have nothing to do. No one needs you right now. This is your time to focus on the breath. Breathing in and out. Continuing to breathe in through the nose and out through the nose. On the out breath, repeat these affirmations in the mind. May I be peaceful. May I be safe. May I be well. May I be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. May we be peaceful. May we be safe. May we be well. May we be free of all discontentedness and the suffering it causes. May my family and friends be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May my co-workers and neighbors be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all those who I interact with today be peaceful. May they be safe. May they be well. May they be free of all discontentedness in the suffering it causes. May all beings, wherever they reside, be peaceful. May all beings be safe. May all beings be well. May all beings be free of discontentedness and the suffering it causes. Now return back to breathing mindfulness meditation, focusing on the breath, cutting off and letting go anytime the mind moves off the breath. Breathing in and out. ระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหาเขวาพุทธังมหาเขวันหังอภิวาเทมิ สวากขาโตมหาเขวตาธัมโมธัมมังนามัสสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเขวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหาเขวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารณังสัมมุโนสกขาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามานุสนังปุโตภาควาติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. So for those of you guys that have been meditating with me throughout the week, I've been slowly increasing the meditation time up to 30 minutes because, as you guys might know, that I recommend students meditate 2 or 3 times a day for 30 minutes or more. And sometimes it takes a student 6 months, a year, even 2 years on their own to build up to that type of frequency and that type of schedule or that type of duration. But here over the last week, I've been meditating longer and longer periods of time to be able to help you guys build this up. So if this meditation felt like, wow, that was, pretty straightforward and it didn't seem like it was very long, then wonderful. You can continue to meditate like that. If it felt like it was a bit long, then just keep working towards that. Or if it felt like it was a little bit short and you felt like you could have done more, then you kind of have that as a little gauge to help you understand where you're at with your meditation practice. So this was basically 30-minute meditation here, what we just did. Okay. So today's topic is the path to enlightenment, practicing the path in the workplace. As I mentioned, as we were starting class, in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to practice the path everywhere and anywhere. And when you're making your way towards enlightenment, it can feel like a real struggle sometimes practicing the path to enlightenment, especially something like right speech, where relationships, you might have a craving, desire, attachment in those relationships. That's why I taught yesterday how to eliminate attachment to those who are close to you, because when you have attachment, it's really hard to practice right speech oftentimes. So that breathing mindfulness meditation and generosity is there to really help you knock that down, and all the other things that we talked about yesterday. But even in your work environment, whether it's coworkers or your boss or colleagues or business partners, customers, things like this, you might find it challenging to use things like right speech and other aspects of the path. But in order to get to enlightenment, you're going to need to be able to practice the path at all times. And as I mentioned, it can be a bit of a challenge on your way to enlightenment. But by the time you get to enlightenment, you'll be practicing these teachings effortlessly. One of the ways that I think about it is when you have a computer system, like an operating system, you kind of get used to that operating system. And even though it kind of has some quirks and it has some bugs and it has some errors, you kind of work around those things and you kind of figure out the way to kind of get done what it is you need to get done. But then whenever you install a new operating system, whenever there's a new upgrade and there's been this significant shift in the operating system, it's a bit challenging to function with this operating system for a period of time because your mind is seeing things have been moved around. You can't really find the same things that you used to do. It's not as easy and straightforward anymore. It feels a little bit cumbersome. But maybe after a week or 2 or 3, you get used to this new operating system and you're like, oh my goodness, this is so much easier. Why didn't they just do it this way to begin with? This is so much easier. So it took you maybe a week or 2 or 3 to get up and running on that new operating system, but then you function with ease without those little quirks and bugs and errors anymore. So getting to enlightenment is essentially the same thing, that before you're on this path to enlightenment, the mind has this old operating system where it's functioning with this old archaic unenlightened mind 1.0, right? And now there's things that are kind of cumbersome and challenging. You know, you kind of find these little errors here and there and you kind of work around them and kind of figure out how to put life together and figure out how to make things work in one way or another. But now what you're doing is you're upgrading your operating system. You're trying to move to this enlightened mind 9.0. And there's kind of like these incremental upgrades as you go. It's not just going from 1.0 directly to 9.0. You got to kind of go to 1.5 and 1.7 and 1.8. Then you're on version 2, and then you go 2.3 and 2.9, and you get the version 3, and you keep building up your operating system little by little by little on your computer. Well, the same thing is true about the mind, is you just kind of gradually dial these teachings in little by little by little. And wherever you're having discontentedness, wherever you're having struggles or difficulties in life, whether it's in your personal relationships or your professional relationships, this is the indication to you that your mind hasn't yet cultivated all the wisdom that it needs to function with ease, that the mind is still not fully up and running on this new operating system. So wherever you see those little rough spots or that harshness or that difficulties or struggles, that's the indication to you that there's still some wisdom for you to cultivate in that particular area. And where you need to, you can always reach out to me. You can take classes. I can help you to understand that. But what I'm going to teach you is some things to kind of get you ahead of the curve, some kind of proactive things that you can be doing in your work environment to be able to help you now upgrade your operating system and now function with this enlightened mind 9.0. Because you're going to need to be practicing the teachings in all situations, in all parts of your life. But as I mentioned, it can be quite challenging. So that's why you're always working with the breathing mindfulness, meditation, and generosity, and all those other things to kind of gradually build up your practice. And in the meantime, keeping these things in mind as well. Okay, so the first thing that I've been sharing throughout all of these classes as part of this course is to acquire wisdom. I never know who's going to be in one particular class or another, particularly as I live stream. There can be different people who are attending. So I know some of you guys have heard this with every single class that I've been teaching as part of this course, is to acquire wisdom. Well, that's because wisdom is so important. Without acquiring the wisdom of the path to enlightenment, you wouldn't be able to practice the teachings in a way that's going to transform your mind and transform your relationships. So this is why it's so important to learn, examine, investigate the teachings, to reflect on them, to independently verify them, and then to practice. This is where you're not believing the teachings. The teachings of the Buddha is not about believe, and then hope something good happens when you die. You're working to acquire wisdom through investigating the teachings and examining things. And where you see those rough spots, as I mentioned, where you see the mind struggling, this is because the mind hasn't cultivated the wisdom that it needs. So you're going to need to focus on developing this deep practice of the teachings more and more. And as I mentioned, you're going to need to develop meditation and generosity. Whereas if you're meditating prior to work, this can be really helpful because you go into work having cultivated some loving kindness before you go in and start having meetings. And even if you're just doing breathing mindfulness meditation, this can promote more concentration in your mind before you're going into work. And as you're practicing generosity in all parts of your life, remember to practice generosity in your work environment too. This is really helpful to maybe bring in some bagels every once in a while, or bring in some, fresh juice, or something like this, whatever it is that you think that you would like to contribute to the work environment. You can be practicing generosity with your coworkers, your boss, and people like this. But just be sure as you do that you're doing it with everybody equally, because remember equanimity. If you're just bringing in like fruit juice for your favorite employee, coworker, and it's just that one person, but there's these other 6 people who you didn't bring something in for, because of their cravings, they can experience jealousy. And now they're going to attribute those painful feelings to you, and they're going to push you aside. They might be bitter and harsh and hostile to you at different times. So if you're going to practice generosity in the work environment, be sure that you're practicing this equally. So if you work in a place where there's 200 or 300 people, and there's just no way for you to bring in enough things for everybody, then maybe you find other ways to do this. Like, for example, say you made a cake, or you bought a cake. You could go into a conference room and you can let everybody know that, hey, this cake is going to be here at 2 p.m. So after lunch, everybody can get a nice piece of cake, but then it's up to them to choose to come or not. It's not you going around distributing the cake, but instead they're choosing to come or not. And you might only in that situation need enough for maybe 30 people or 50 people. So in this kind of situation, maybe just one big cake, maybe $30, $50. I don't know how much cakes cost where you guys live, but it's not too expensive. So maybe you can do something like that every once in a while. Or maybe you can help out one of your coworkers. Maybe if they're challenged with something, maybe you can share your time or your effort or your energy to help them with some particular task or some particular project they're working on. And now you can do that with all your different coworkers, where it doesn't even cost money to practice generosity. You can use your time, effort, and energy to help different coworkers at different times in your work environment, because now people are going to view you as very helpful because you're going around helping people. So you can practice this generosity in your work environment too. And you can even practice meditation. There were times where, like after lunch or before lunch, where I was working in the past, I would go meditate in different places. In some offices, the only place I could find to meditate would be in the bathroom. So I would go to the bathroom into a stall, and I didn't have to use the bathroom or anything. I would leave my clothes on and I would sit on the toilet and I would meditate on the toilet, because people aren't going to bother you there. But there's some work environments nowadays that actually have meditation rooms, or they have rooms for women to nurse their babies, right? And sometimes these rooms aren't being used, so I would sometimes go into those kinds of places and meditate, or maybe an empty conference room or something like this. So you can always potentially find a place here or there, and if not, maybe you go out to your car, or maybe you go outside to a park or sit under a tree, or maybe at lunch you find a place to meditate. So you can kind of integrate a bit of meditation into your work day, which will really help you if you're meditating in the morning and then you're meditating somewhere in the middle of the day. Even if it's just 5 or 10 minutes, that can be very beneficial. Ideally, you would get to 30 minutes per meditation session, but you may not be able to do that in some situations. So even if you can get 5 minutes in here, 10 minutes in there, sometimes you can go to a business meeting a little bit early. Maybe the business meeting starting at 2:00. Maybe you show up at 1:40 or 1:45. The conference room is empty, and you go in there and do a little bit of meditation before the meeting, which is going to help your mind be more concentrated prior to the actual meeting. So this is something that you can consider as part of your practice. And then you'll need to eliminate any complacency related to developing the path to enlightenment. That's something the Buddha teaches. But these same teachings that apply to your development on the path to enlightenment, it also applies to your work environment too. That if you were complacent in your work environment in terms of your work or projects or different assignments that you have, then this complacency is going to not promote success in your work environment. So you're going to need to eradicate any complacency related to developing your path to enlightenment in these teachings in your life practice and in terms of meditation, but you're going to also need to do that with your work projects too. If you're feeling like you're kind of procrastinating or you're complacent related to any work projects, you're going to need to arise what's called the enlightenment factor of energy. The enlightenment factor of energy is having a willingness to do something, showing initiative, showing ambition, showing enthusiasm. This is something that you're going to need related to the path to enlightenment. You're going to need dedication, determination, and diligence to meditate and to learn and read books and talk to your teacher and do these kinds of things. There's a certain amount of effort that's involved in getting to enlightenment, but also there's a certain amount of effort in certain daily tasks that we do too. So you're going to need to apply this enlightenment factor of energy where you have a willingness to do something, you have initiative and ambition and enthusiasm and motivation in your work projects as well. So you can apply the teachings of the Buddha that he teaches in relationship to the path to enlightenment. You can apply these to your work environment too, in terms of this complacency and practicing the enlightenment factor of energy. Then the Buddha gives guidance on what's called right livelihood as part of the core central teaching of the path, which is the Eightfold Path. That fifth step, or that fifth factor, is purifying your livelihood to the point where you're not causing any harm through your livelihood. And he gives various guidance on this, where he talks about these 5 trades not to be plied, or these 5 businesses that would cause harm: business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. We talked about this on Monday when we were discussing the Eightfold Path. So you would like to look at your livelihood and be sure you're not causing harm and you're not functioning in one of these livelihoods, because it'll cause harm in the community, and then this harm will come back to you. But then remember, there are those other teachings that the Buddha taught as well about scheming, hinting, belittling, flattering, pursuing gain with gain. I'll have a slide here in a moment to remind you of those things. That's what we call the first fold of purification, where you're not practicing business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness, and poisons. Because if you're doing any of these, this is causing harm, and you're sustaining your life on causing harm to other beings, and this harm is going to come back to you. But then the Buddha has these other teachings of scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, pursuing gain with gain, and we talked about those. If you guys have any questions about those, let me know when we get to the question period, because this is what we call the first fold of purification with your livelihood. But then there's a second fold of purification that you would like to get to, which the Buddha describes this as ensuring that the pollutions of craving, anger, and ignorance aren't hindering you in terms of the work that you're doing and your choice to perform a certain job. I'll give you an example. Say that as I'm growing up, maybe I'm in my 20s, and I would really like to be a police officer. I really want this job as a police officer. And I decide to take this job as a police officer. Now I'm doing this job maybe 5 years, 8 years, but somewhere along the line, I get on the path to enlightenment. And now as I get on the path to enlightenment, I realize that, yes, I'm not performing any of these things. I'm not having business and weapons, living beings, meat, substances that cause heedlessness or poisons, and I'm not scheming, flattering, hinting, belittling, pursuing gain with gain. I'm not doing any of these things. So I've got the first fold of purification down, right? But now, as I start eliminating the fetters, those pollutions of the mind, one of the things you're eliminating is conceit, which involves arrogance or putting yourself above others or below others. And maybe what I realize is that in this job as being a police officer, the way that I'm choosing to do it, maybe I'm putting myself above others. Maybe I think I'm better than everybody else, and I'm kind of above the law because I'm a police officer. But now as I start eliminating this conceit, this pollution out of the mind, I realize that what's really at the core of my interest to be a police officer is that I like to help people. And now that I see that I chose this job as a police officer because of my ego, and my ego is starting to be eliminated, maybe I'm not interested in being a police officer anymore. Maybe I switch and decide to be a social worker or a mental health therapist or something like this. And that might be my fully purified livelihood that I feel really enthused about every day. Maybe I don't like going in to be a police officer anymore because I'm having to beat up people. I'm having to throw them onto cars and handcuff them them and throw them into jail. Maybe this is something that doesn't really match with the qualities of mind that I'm starting to cultivate now on the path to enlightenment. So while I initially might have got started with a certain livelihood, as I started getting rid of all these pollutions in the mind, I might realize that underneath of all that, what was really motivating me for this particular livelihood was I like to help people. And now I might shift my livelihood as part of my path to enlightenment. And that might be a better match for what it is that I'm truly interested in doing. And that doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with being a police officer. There's surely people who are police officers that are doing that without ego. I'm just using this as an example for you of how somebody could potentially take a livelihood based in maybe some ego or some other mental defilement or pollution that the Buddha teaches. And as you're eliminating those from the mind, you might realize that you need to shift your livelihood. So that's the second fold of purification, is getting your livelihood to the point where you're not practicing and motivating your decisions based in craving, anger, and ignorance. By the time you get to this purified livelihood where you've purified the first fold and second fold, you'll be so enthused and motivated and encouraged about your livelihood that you'll enjoy the work that you do. It doesn't even feel like work anymore by the time you get to a fully purified livelihood. It just feels like, wow, I'm just going to do this thing that I really enjoy doing, like coming here to teach you guys. I'm not truly working, right? Some people might say, oh, David's at work. He's sharing the teachings of the Buddha. No, I'm not working. I'm doing something I thoroughly enjoy. This is why I'm able to come here every day, for so long and spend so much time teaching. I teach every single day, whether I'm here at the temple or I'm at home. I'm online teaching because I thoroughly enjoy it. I have enthusiasm and motivation to do it. It doesn't even feel like work to me. Of course, I'm putting in time and effort and energy and resources to do it, but it doesn't feel like work because I just enjoy it. So by the time you get to a purified livelihood, whatever you're doing, you would do it even if you did get paid for it. Of course, you need to get paid for it. You need to have certain basic necessities to be able to sustain your life. But that's not the motivating factor of why you're choosing to do the work. Or your ego or any kind of arrogance or pride. That's not the motivating factor behind why you've chosen this particular livelihood. So you're going to need to find a livelihood where you just thoroughly enjoy it and you're motivated by it, so that each day when you wake up, it's like, yeah, let's go do that thing that I really enjoy. Instead of like, oh my goodness, do I have to go to work again? I'm sure you guys have probably had that kind of job at some point in your life, potentially, where you just feel like it's a drag to go to work every day. So in terms of getting to peace and joy in your mind and peaceful and joyful life, if you feel like it's a drag to go to work every day, your life's not going to be peaceful and it's not going to be joyful. So when you can get to a livelihood where you fully purified it of this first fold and the second fold, you'll thoroughly enjoy the work. It doesn't even feel like work anymore. And this is what you would ultimately like to get to in your livelihood, because you're going to perform better. Not only are you going to enjoy the work that you're doing day to day, but you're going to perform better in that livelihood. You're going to be very enthused about the work that you do. So these are the teachings of the Buddha on right livelihood for the first fold. If you'd like to see the second fold in the words of the Buddha, it's in volume 12, chapter 14. You can get the book here. You can get it online. You can download it. You can buy it from Amazon. It's available online at no cost if you download it from our website, or you can take it and go print it. So in volume 12, chapter 14, this is going to help you to fully purify your livelihood, because you can see the original words of the Buddha based on that. Here, it's easy to put this first fold into a slide, but the second fold, it's much more extensive, what he's talking about. So I can't really put it into a slide. So I just reference that book so that you can go find it there. If you're in a particular job and you're not sure whether it's a right livelihood and fully purified, you might consult that book. If you're in between jobs and you're not even employed right now and you're looking to get a new job, you might consult that book. Or any number of reasons. If you're maybe looking to change your livelihood, you might consult volume 12, chapter 14, because that's where you'll see the teachings of the Buddha. And then I put some reflections in there to be able to help you understand how to practice it. So you would like to get to a fully purified livelihood because you're going to perform better in that livelihood. You're going to enjoy it so much more. Then remember, when you're at work, your mind can only do one thing at a time. right? You'd like to train this more and more. In some environments, we're taught to multitask. And if you've in a work environment where your boss or coworkers are pressuring you to multitask, you might decide that you need to find another livelihood because your mind rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing, where you're doing something for 3 seconds, you're doing another thing for 5 seconds, you're doing another thing for 10 seconds. You're not really multitasking. You're not doing all those things at one time. Your mind is just rapidly cycling from thing to thing to thing. And when you get home, you might find that you're quite stressed and you're having a lot of anxiety, and it's kind of hard for you to relax when you get home. So you're going to need to be able to do one thing at a time, and practicing so that your mind isn't overactive, so your mind's not rapidly cycling and stimulated due to its craving, desire, attachment. So practice this singleness of mind where you're doing just one thing at a time, where you're not attempting to even do more than one thing. Realize that this is gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. Because right now you might be walking down the street and talking on the phone, and this is really unwise. There's people that have gotten killed for that. Right? They've been walking down the street. They didn't realize that there's a car coming, and they walked right out into the middle of the street and whack. And this is the Gotama of having not practiced singleness of mind. Remember, it's not punishment and rewards. It's the results of your decisions. You didn't realize that you should be practicing singleness of mind, and here's somebody in a major city talking on the phone, walking down the street, and boom, they got hit, maybe injured or even killed because of this. So practicing one thing at a time is very helpful. This is going to train your mind to more and more be in the middle. It's almost like a piece of wood, and you have a piece of steel rod, and you grind this piece of steel back and forth. As you first start doing this, the steel rod's going to bounce around a lot because there's not a groove there yet. But as you grind this steel rod back and forth on the wood more and more, eventually you get a groove going, and you get deeper and deeper into this groove, and it's less and less likely to pop out. But when it does pop out of the groove, you'll know that you'll be able to bring it back to the groove. But the more you grind this steel rod back and forth, eventually the groove will get so deep it will never pop out ever again. Your mind is the same way. If during meditation you're practicing to focus on the breath, and if during daily life you're focusing with singleness of mind, initially it's going to be quite challenging because your mind's going to want to bounce around. But over time, your mind will get more and more used to being in the middle, and it'll just stay there because you've got a really nice groove. So by the time you're fully practicing singleness of mind, your mind won't bounce around. It'll just be focused in the middle. Like right here, all this week, as you guys are listening to me, and in the future courses and classes, as you're listening to me, you can be practicing singleness of mind. That as you notice that your mind has gone off my voice and you're not able to pay attention, maybe you're thinking about lunch, or maybe you're thinking about something this evening that you need to do, or maybe you're thinking about something next week or tomorrow, you can cut that off and bring it back. And more you get used to focusing with singleness of mind in a situation like this where you're learning. So this will help you even just learning to practice singleness of mind. So if you're meditating, you're coming and listening to a teacher talk, and in your work environment, you're practicing singleness of mind. At home, when you're vacuuming, or you're cleaning a bathroom, or you're washing dishes, you're just doing one thing at a time. More and more, your mind gets used to being in the middle, and it'll just stay there. So interact with just one person at a time, because the challenge is in the work environment, people don't necessarily know that you're practicing singleness of mind. They might have been taught to multitask. And now when you're in your office working on the computer, or you're talking on a phone, somebody might barge into your office and try to get your attention. And you're not going to be able to train everybody to do things your way. You can't go around the office and say, by the way, I'm practicing singleness of mind. If I'm on the phone, please don't come into my office, right? This is not going to work because there's new employees all the time. This is trying to train the world to do things your way. Instead, you would like to just practice in such a way that you're able to maintain your singleness of mind. And the way that you do this is, say you're on the phone in your office and somebody barges into your office and just starts talking to you. Don't talk back to them. Don't pause your phone call and then interact with them, because what you've just taught that person is, if you barge in on me, I'm going to stop doing what I'm doing and address you. Instead, just continue to talk on the phone. And if you need to look away, like if you need to turn your chair and look away from them in order to continue to talk on the phone, then do that if that's what you need to do. And then slowly but surely, people in your office realize when you're on the phone and they barge into your office, you're not going to address them. I needed to do this with my son because I work at home sometimes where I'm teaching students online and I'm meeting with students in Zoom. And when I first started doing that many years ago, he would barge into my room and he'd be like, Dad, I need you to do blah, 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 blah. And I'm sitting there talking to the students, and I would just put up my finger and I would go like this. And it just means wait. And then I would just continue to talk to the student. And even if we came to a break where I could easily break and talk to him, I didn't. I continued to talk because what I was doing is I was teaching him through my decisions, not overtly teaching him, but I was teaching him based on the way I practiced to stand there and be patient. So I would just continue to talk, sometimes for 3 minutes, 4 minutes, 5 minutes. Sometimes he would decide to leave. He would realize that what he had to say to me wasn't very important, and he would just leave on his own. And then after I was done the appointment, then I would go downstairs and I would see him and I would say, yes, you had something to talk with Dad about. And he's like, oh, don't worry, I figured it out. I'm like, all right, perfect. That's what I'd like you to do. That's wonderful. You figured it out. So he did this maybe 15, 20 times before he realized like, oh yeah, I can't barge into Dad's room and get his attention. And now he doesn't do it anymore. The only time he ever comes in my room is like if the house is burning down, which hasn't happened yet, right? And they have these signs sometimes in the work environment where you can put up in your office, says something like, an emergency on your part doesn't mean an emergency on my part. Because sometimes people think that what they have to talk about is so important and such an emergency, they just barge in on you. So I've seen some people, they will put this in their office so that it reminds people, hey, just because you think this thing is so important, it doesn't mean that it's important. So kind of consider those kinds of things, that when people are barging into your office, don't just address them right away. Like if you're on an email and you're typing out an email, continue to type out your email, get your thoughts out, fully, get it out, and then address the person who's walked in. And this will help through your decision making, that people will slowly realize how you function. You don't have to go around and overtly teach people what to do and how to do it. You just function in a way that you know is wise, and then everybody else around you will adjust to your decision making. Just like my son adjusted to my decision making, that he saw what I was doing, he saw the way I functioned, and he chose to stop barging into my room and trying to get my attention. So interacting with one person at a time will help you to be able to accomplish that. Then keep in mind that the way that the mind functions is that when it's calm, you can have mindfulness or awareness of mind. And when you have awareness of mind, you can have concentration or focus. And when you have focus and concentration, you can access your wisdom and make wise decisions in your work or any other part of your life. When your mind is uncalm, you don't have mindfulness or awareness of mind, and you don't have concentration or focus, and therefore you're not going to be able to access wisdom and make wise decisions. The example I usually give you guys to help you realize this is that if you got a phone call that your mom was in a terrible car accident and she's in the back of an ambulance on the way to the hospital, you might be really shaken up by this if you're attached to your mom, right? And now you're all shaken up and you grab your keys, you run across town, maybe you get in a car accident yourself, maybe you show up to the hospital, your mind's all frazzled, the doctors and nurses are trying to talk to you to try to help your mom and make some decisions, and you can't make the decisions very easily because your mind's all frazzled and shaken up. So allowing your mind to become uncalm, it means you're not going to be able to access your wisdom and make wise decisions in any situation, including your work environment. So in your work environment, you would like to maintain your calmness and composure. This is that healthy mental state of equanimity that we talked about back at the beginning of the course, that you'd like to practice that calmness, the composure, that evenness of temper, especially in a difficult situation. I think you guys might have heard me share in the past that when I was in business for myself, at one time I was at one of my locations and the landlord came in. It was a new landlord who just bought this building, and they were really aggressively trying to make money because they had spent all this money on the building. And prior to them buying this building, I had negotiated a really low lease with the prior owners, because the prior owners, they had this building for like 40 years and they weren't trying to make a whole bunch of money. They negotiated a very low lease with me, but this new owner, having purchased this building for a lot of money, they were trying to squeeze out as much money as they could out of this building. And they didn't like the fact that I had a very low lease and I was paying low rent. So at one point, the landlord was trying to get me out of this building. He was trying to get me to close my business and move somewhere else. And at one point, they came in and threatened to kill me in front of my employees, in front of my customers. They were up in my face. They were yelling and shouting and hollering in front of all my employees, in front of my customers. And I had to stand there with calmness and composure. You know, it only lasted for a few minutes, but then afterwards, when they left, I needed to continue my day. I needed to continue to work and help my employees and help my customers. So if I would have allowed my mind to be frazzled and shaken up, maybe I would have done something that was unwise. Maybe I would have hit this person. Maybe I would have, gotten a baseball bat and beat him up or something. I don't know. But I was able to maintain my calmness and composure. I was able to just stand there and listen to what he had to say. And then he walked away, and I calmly went to my office and handled the things I needed to handle. So you can maintain your calmness and composure, especially in difficult situations. Maybe somebody would have called the police in that situation, which I easily could have done. I chose not to in that situation. I just chose to let him go on and move on, and I just moved on with my day. So you're going to encounter various situations, maybe not like this one, but maybe other situations. Maybe you get some news while you're at work about your family, and that might normally shake up your mind. You're going to need to maintain your calmness and composure. Maybe your boss comes in and tells you the company's downsizing and he's looking at laying off employees, and now you're worried about whether it's going to be your job or not. Maybe they need to cut back on salaries. You get some kind of news like this or information. Maybe there's a certain project team that you're on and you've 80% of the way through the project, and then maybe the customer decides to cancel the project, and you were really looking forward to completing this project, and now the project's been canceled. Right? So you're going to experience these different things. And if you allow your mind to be shaken up by this, then you're not going to be able to access your wisdom. When you don't have attachment, when you don't have craving, desire, attachment, your mind can maintain its calmness. But when you have craving, desire, attachment to a work project or to your boss or to your money, as these types of decisions are being made, it'll shake you up. Whereas if you're really attached to this particular project and you're 80% of the way through and they cancel it, you're going to be shaken up because you really want to get that project done. Or if you're really attached to your salary and the amount of money you're making, and now they say they need to reduce your salary because the company's cutting costs, your mind will be shaken up by that. Or if you're attached to one of your family members or your boss, and now you get this particular news or information, your mind can be easily shaken up. So where you notice that, because it can occur as you have attachment, that's where you maybe find that quiet corner and go do some meditation if that's what you need to do. Make it part of your regular day so that you can maintain your calmness and composure, because then you'll be able to access your wisdom, and now you'll be a better and better valued employee, and you'll be less likely to get laid off in a situation where a company's downsizing. So if you can maintain your calmness and composure at work, and you're accessing your wisdom and you're making wiser and wiser decisions in a work environment, your boss is going to see you as a problem solver, that you're somebody that can get things done, and now they're going to be more interested in having you in the company, and they're going to be less likely to lay you off. Where if you're polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, you're speaking with right speech, you're conducting yourself in a very professional manner, you're going to be less likely to get laid off when a company's downsizing, because you're contributing to the work environment. But if your mind is getting shaken up, you're easily frazzled, you're not really able to access wisdom, contribute something to the work environment, if you're impolite, unkind, unfriendly, and disrespectful in your work environment, you're going to be one of the first people they probably lay off in that kind of situation. So by practicing these teachings, you'll not only be a better person and a better, more harmonious relationships in your personal life, but also in your professional life too. You'll see that it's going to really help you to be more and more successful in your professional world, in the professional life. So this Eightfold Path is something that you can be practicing at work as well. whether it's right view, right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. You can be practicing this in the workplace. So you guys learned this as it relates to getting to enlightenment when I taught on Monday. But now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this Eightfold Path and I'm going to show you how you can apply this to your work environment as well. So if you remember what right view is about the Four Noble Truths. And the Buddha teaches you how craving, desire, attachment is the cause of discontentedness in the mind. This is what's causing the encountering on a day-to-day basis with your feelings and your emotions. You can apply this to the work environment too, where you accept and acknowledge responsibility for the various projects and assignments that are given to you. That you realize that when somebody's giving you a project, that you need to accept responsibility for this and that you need to take ownership over this in order to be sure that it gets done all the way to completion. So you can apply this to your work environment too, because what the Buddha teaches you as part of the natural law of Gotama, which is also part of right view, is that everything you experience in life is a result of your decisions. That when you experience wholesome results in your life, this is a result of your decisions. And when you experience unwholesome results in your life, this is a result of your decisions. So you can apply that in your work environment too. That if you're experiencing certain aspects of your work environment where you're experiencing wholesome results, where you're getting promotions, people are friendly and kind to you, people are involving you in their projects, maybe they're coming to consult you for certain advice when they get to a certain challenge in their work. This is because of your decisions and the way you interact in your work environment. People are seeing you as somebody that's reliable and dependable, and they can come visit you to get help. And then conversely, if you're not being very well received in your work environment, you need to look at that too. And what are the decisions you're making that are causing that? So if you think about the right view as it relates to your work, you can accept responsibility for the project you're experiencing. And then anything that's happening in your work environment, accept responsibility for that too and solve it and take it all the way to its completion. And then with right intention, right speech, right action, and right livelihood, these are essential teachings in order to get to enlightenment. And you can practice these in relationship to your work relationships too. That right intention is about renunciation, non-ill will, and harmlessness. We talked about this. We talked about right speech in terms of not lying, not having slander, not having harsh speech, not having frivolous speech. And then, of course, the 5 factors of well-spoken speech, speaking at the proper time, what you say is true, gentle, beneficial, with a mind of loving kindness. Remember your bodily actions, that you're not interested in causing harm through your bodily actions. And then, of course, the livelihood itself, we just talked about that in purification of the livelihood. So you can apply all of these in the work environment. Other people aren't going to necessarily know what you're doing, right? But they understand to a certain level when somebody's being polite, kind, friendly, respectful, when you're not interrupting people, when you're talking with a calm mind. These natural laws of existence that you're learning to practice, other people don't need to actively understand these natural laws in order for you to be able to practice them and for them to see that you're doing wise things, that these are universally true, these natural laws. That's why you can go into an environment where people don't even know that you're practicing the teachings of the Buddha, and you can get along just well. About 1.5 years ago, I went to Egypt. The students there asked me to come, and I went there to teach in Egypt. And this is a Muslim country, right? Everybody around pretty much is Muslim. I met some Christians while I was there too as well, but there really isn't much Buddhism going on in Egypt. But when I went there, I didn't change the way that I functioned. I functioned the same way that I function here in Thailand. I functioned the same way in Egypt. I went around wowing people. I went around smiling to people. I would say assalamu alaikum. That's one thing that I changed different. Instead of saying sawadee kap, I would say assalamu alaikum, right? And they would say assalam, or however they reply back. I forget the reply. But I would go around, I would be friendly and polite and cordial to people, and they reciprocated that, right? Because it's the natural law of karma. It's cause and effect. This natural law, it doesn't just function here in Thailand. It functions all over the world. And the Buddha is teaching you how to cut through cultural barriers and cultural conditioning and this various cultures that the culture is conditioning. This is how the mind is brought up to think in one way or another. And the teachings of the Buddha, these natural laws of existence, are universally true amongst all beings, that if you function this way through the natural law of karma, you'll see how you can function with ease and harmonious relationships. So even going to a Muslim country, I was able to function in the exact same way that I function here in Thailand. And I could function there with these same natural laws. And people treated me wonderfully. I had a great time there. The person who asked me to come, he said, for someone from the U.S. coming to Egypt, if you don't have somebody from Egypt with you, you will be dead in 24 hours. And I said, okay, let's see if that's true. And it wasn't. I went there and I was going all these different places without him, and I didn't get killed because I wasn't causing harm to anybody. In his opinion, he thought that people would treat me really badly, but they didn't. They treated me well. Of course, there was a few things here and there that it would be, I would, say it would be unwise for these things to have occurred. But the same thing happened in America, and the same thing happens in other places as well. But nonetheless, people treated me very well because I was treating them well. I wasn't causing harm to anybody. So you can cut through all of this cultural conditioning. You can cut through the office politics. You can cut through all of that kind of stuff by getting to the natural laws of existence that the Buddha teaches with right intention, right speech, right action, right livelihood. You don't need to just practice these amongst other people who are understanding these teachings. When you're practicing these teachings, they're universally understood. Even though people don't necessarily know exactly what you're practicing and how you're doing it, they can experience you being polite, kind, friendly, and respectful, and then you'll have wholesome results because of that. And then there's right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration, where you're going to need to cultivate that mental discipline at all parts of your day, including at your livelihood, so that when you're practicing right effort, that is any time unwholesome qualities come up, you're cutting that off and letting it go. And then you're cultivating the wholesome qualities, or applying right effort to cultivate those. And then your mindfulness is awareness of mind, that you're aware of the mind at all times. That's going to help you apply right effort, so that if you see the unwholesome aspects of the mind arising, you can cut that off and let it go. And then you can apply effort to cultivate the wholesome qualities in the mind. And then you can cultivate your right concentration, where you're practicing meditation and you're practicing singleness of mind. So you can be practicing this in your livelihood as well. Okay, so let me see what questions you guys have. This is everything that I have to share on this topic. But the way that I teach, I don't know if you guys realize this or not, but I teach to a certain level of detail. And then as you guys ask questions, we can go deeper down into it. So this is the content that I've put together to kind of teach students about how to practice the teachings of the Buddha in your livelihood. But I teach to a certain level of detail. And then as you guys ask questions, we go deeper down into it. So if I taught you every last little facet of every last little thing that I know about practicing these teachings in a livelihood, it would take a really long time to be able to do that. So what I usually do with all these topics is I teach to a certain level of detail, and then I see what you guys would like to ask questions about, and then we get deeper into it. So if you guys have any questions about this here at the temple, if you could use the microphones the way we've been doing throughout the week. And those of you guys online, if you would like to put your questions into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom in the comment section, I'll see that and be able to answer your question. For those of you guys in Zoom, if you would like to raise your hand electronically, do that, and then you can open up your mic and we'll be able to hear you here at the temple. So does anybody have questions on anything that I've shared about this particular topic? Junko, yeah.
Morning. So my question is, I think it's a quick one. So as a one livelihood, so the Buddha said hinting. So maybe it's only me. I don't understand. So what kind of job about hinting?
Yeah, what he's describing here is he's describing being unclear in communicating at work, so that if you're on a project team, mm-hmm. and say I'm on a 5-person project team and I go in to talk to the boss, all 5 of us are going in to brief the boss on this project. Yeah. And now in the meeting, I'm like, Yeah, I did my work and I was really dedicated to getting it all done, and I did my part of the project, but I'm not quite sure about what Barbara did. This is kind of like, we call it beating around the bush. Have you ever heard that phrase before? Instead of just being clear and direct and say, hey, boss, here's what I was able to accomplish in the last week, and here's the work that I was able to do for you. Boom. We don't need to like hint or beat around the bush. You need to be very clear, very concise, and very precise in your work environment, rather than being unclear in your work. Because if you're hinting around and you're not really being clear, this is going to affect you in your livelihood. So while this first fold of purification is the type of livelihood, and the Buddha is guiding you not to cause harm through the type of livelihood that you choose, here the Buddha is talking about how you perform your livelihood. So for example, if I was a politician, it's not one of these 5 right here. I'm not causing harm through my livelihood, my choice of livelihood. But if I was corrupt, if I was scheming in my livelihood, that's going to cause harm. So therefore, harm's going to come to me. But also this hinting is like not being clear. If I was a politician, I wasn't being very clear about the work that I'm doing with my voters and my constituents, then I'm going to have difficulties in my role as a politician. So I would like to be very clear as a politician as I'm doing my livelihood. So this right here is how you're performing your livelihood.
It looks like I sound like a little bit liar. It's not lie exactly, but maybe like that, or it's really not clear. So it's feeling like telling a lie.
Lying is taken care of in right speech, because even though this is talking about your livelihood, you still need to practice right speech in your livelihood. So that's covered there under right speech or right communication. Here, this is more about how you're performing your livelihood, and that you would like to be clear and concise. I mean, it's true even in your personal life. You would like to be clear and concise about your, with your speech. But in terms of your livelihood, you would like to be very clear with what you're doing in your livelihood and how you're doing it. So that's what this is referring to. The more clear, the more conciseness and preciseness you have in your work, people can see you're on top of it. Right? Like say you have a business and you have a website, you would like to be very clear. You like to be very concise and very clear in your website or your marketing materials or anything else, any project teams or any presentations you're doing. You would like to, not hinting around, you would like to be very clear and concise about the work that you're doing.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Rachel has a question here online. Rachel, if you'd like to open up your mic, you're welcome to.
Thank you. First, I'd like to thank Janko for raising the question, because I have the same question regarding hinting. My question is about the one task at a time. I have 2 examples and I would like to seek for your advice. One example is while you are giving the sharing and I am listening, I sometimes or occasionally would take some notes. For example, maybe some important messages or maybe some new words. And I occasionally would look up into the dictionary for some words, because English is my second language. But when I do so, my mind is doing 2 things, listening and trying to take some notes or trying to look up into the dictionary. Sometimes I will miss your speech. That's one example. Another example is while Junko was asking the question and you were giving you were answering the question. Occasionally, my mind was thinking, "Oh, how would I phrase my question? Then I can ask a question after you finish your reply." So, and when I do so, when my mind is on 2 things, I think I can not do either well. So that's 2. These are the 2 examples.
Sure.
It just happened on yeah.
Sure. In these situations, your mind is really focused on one thing, but you've got something else like in the background. So for example, like listening to a teacher speak and then taking notes. your mind in that situation, while you're taking the notes, is truly focused on the notes. You're hearing the voice, you're hearing the teacher's voice, and that's something that you can hear, but your mind is literally on the notes and actually taking the notes. That's what's really, truly happening in that situation. So while it appears that you're doing two different things, it's really not. And let me give you an example to help illustrate this a little bit closer, that the body can do one thing and the mind is doing something else. So for example, like I can rub the top of my head with one hand and I can rub my belly with the other hand, but the mind can only be in one place at a time. So the body can do multiple things. That's why we can drive. Like I can steer the steering wheel and I can press the pedals with my feet in a car, but the mind is only on one place at a time. So while the body can do multiple things, the mind can only be in one place. So the ear might be hearing the voice and the hand might be writing notes. Those are two different things that the body is doing, but the mind is actually only in one spot.
But the result is that I will miss some of your speech, and it hinders my understanding of your speech. So may I have your suggestion on this kind of situation?
Yeah, that's why the mind misses it, because it can't do two things at one time. What I would do in this situation is take in whatever you can take in. And then now I'm starting to record all the classes and courses and everything. So if you need to go back and listen to it again, you can go to our YouTube channel, our Facebook channel, our podcast, and you can take in the content again more than one time. This is why if you read a book or if you watch a movie, you oftentimes doing that multiple times, where you watch a movie 2 or 3 or 4 times, you pick up on subtle details that you didn't pick up on the first time because your mind was focused on one aspect of the movie and you didn't see that subtle detail of the other aspect. So a learning event is the same thing, that when you go through any particular learning event, you're going to learn a certain amount, maybe 10%, 20% of what's really being offered in that learning experience. But then when you repeat it, you will learn more. And even scientists and researchers, they document this, where like the first time you go through a learning event, I've heard that you essentially are able to learn and acquire about 10% of what's really being offered in that particular learning experience. And then when you repeat it the second time, you're learning like another 30 or 40%. So you're now up to about 50%, of what's really being offered in that particular learning event. And then when you go through that learning event a third time or a fourth time, you're ultimately increasing your ability to have learned what it is that's truly being offered in that experience. So this is why if students are interested in repeating these courses many times or listening to the podcasts or the recordings, I encourage them to do that, because each time you're going to learn a bit more. And not only that, but if you take this course multiple times, there's going to be different questions and different things that I'm going to be sharing as part of the course. So these types of courses like this, you could take them multiple times and continue to learn. And this is the way to improve your retention. And the Buddha's students did this too, because he would say the teachings, he would teach them orally, and then every 2 weeks they would recite the teachings through chanting. And this was the repetition that was built into the way that the Buddha taught. So you can get to that same repetition nowadays by learning live like this, like you are, but then you've got the recordings to be able to bring that in repetitively, where you're not chanting, but you're watching a video or you're reading a book more than one time. And this is accomplishing the same thing that the Buddha did with chanting. You're welcome. Let me see if we have any other questions here. See, we don't have any on YouTube. And we don't have any on Facebook. And I don't see anything here either. So what I'm going to do is, it's 10:30. Let's take a 20-minute break where we come back at 10:50. And we're going to pick it up there with this last remaining topic for our discussions, which is the art of the friendly no, how to say no without saying no. This is going to help you in your relationships. So it's going to probably take me all of about 5 or 10 minutes to teach this to you. And then if you guys like, we can do a little bit of role playing so you can practice it. So I'll see you guys at 10:50 and we'll pick it up there. Okay. So thank you guys for learning, and we'll see you guys in a little bit. Thank you again for watching. Enjoy your meditation. Look forward to seeing you online and answering any questions that you might have. Thank you so much.